In this video, I'm going to show you how I started with this image in RAW format, and after all my edits in Lightroom ended up here, all in Lightroom Classic. Hello amigos, this is Pablo Garcia, the engineer photographer. In last week's video, I showed you how I edited this image of this beautiful red fox in Lightroom Classic and a little bit of Photoshop where I needed to use the technology, the magic of content-aware fill to remove a couple of distractions that I just couldn't remove with Lightroom alone. Well, today we're gonna review how I edited this image. I call this image the Three Amigos of Yellowstone, and I took this photo back in January during a stay at a winter camp that the company Yellowstone Expeditions operates at Yellowstone between December and February every year. I'll put the link in the description to this company. It's a great outfit, and it's a great opportunity, unique opportunity to stay in this camp with your photographer friends and just enjoy the winter magic of Yellowstone. Now, the last day of our 5-day stay at the camp, we saw a lot of bisons, a couple big herds of bison near one of the rivers, and one group of bisons made its way to the road where we were, and this group of 3 bisons started approaching us. We were keeping our distance. Then they stopped, and all 3 bisons are there. Not the best image because one bison is blocking the other 2. So with a little bit of patience, all of a sudden, all 3 were showing their heads and they were looking straight at me. Now let's review this image. This image was taken with a Canon R5 camera, full frame at 500 millimeters. So I was quite a bit far out. And as you can see here in the histogram, this image, this raw file is exposed to the right. We know that if we have a lot of snow, that's going to fool the meter in our camera, so we had to use positive exposure compensation to offset that. And 2, the bisons have very dark fur, especially in the head. So I on purpose push to the right, exposed to the right, to try to get as much detail as I could on the fur. So even though, I'm going to put it in develop mode, even though it may look like a lot of the snow is blown, in reality it's not. We know that the histogram is based on the JPEG representation, and this is a full raw file. So I still have information to be able to recover the whites in this image. So let's start with this image. The first thing I always like to do is look at my cropping, my initial crop. I'm going to crop it a bit from this corner and from the bottom, something like that. And using the letter L in our keyboard turns off the lights in Lightroom, and you can adjust your crop to your liking. And I think this one looks okay. I don't want it to be too close to the right. Letter L again, and we're done. So we just did a minor crop. Now, this image likes contrast, and as I told you, it's exposed to the right. So now I want to do my global edits to give me kind of a baseline for later for applying local edits. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to bring the exposure down, something like a stop or a little more than a stop. I'm going to bring the highlights down. I'm going to start recovering some of the detail on the snow. I'm going to bring the shadows up, primarily looking at the bisons. I'm going to bring the whites down, and if I hold the Alt key, you can see now I don't have any whites that are blown. And I'm going to bring the blacks down. That increases the contrast, and talking about contrast, I'm going to bring contrast up. This is just some initial edits. I'm going to bring the vibrance up, and if we look at the before, this is the before with the crop, and this is after. Already just with these global edits, this image is looking so much better. Now, with the new capabilities in Lightroom, with the mask, now we can apply local edits. And what I'm going to do is edit the bisons first, and then I'm going to edit the snow and the trees on the back later. So let's look at the bisons first. So I'm going to go to the mask and do select subject. And the technology or artificial intelligence in Lightroom identified the bisons, and it did a very good selection. Not perfect. We can see here between the legs some areas that is selected, so I need to subtract that. So I'm going to select subtract. I'm going to select the brush. I'm going to make the brush smaller, and just making sure I have auto mask, click on the areas that I know I want to erase, and we'll let the auto mask do its thing. Some of the areas here, right between the legs there. I'm going to zoom in here. You can just take your time and refine the mask. And there we have, we have a pretty good selection. Maybe here. Now you can spend a little more time and refine the mask, but this mask is looking actually pretty good. Now, what do I want to do with the bisons? Well, I want the bisons to really show up more. I want to show all the detail that is available on the fur. So to do that, I'm going to bring the texture up, and that brings all that detail. I'm going to bring the clarity up, and that also adds additional contrast to the midtones. I'm going to bring my shadows up a bit. I'm going to bring my saturation up. And the other thing I want to do, I want to warm up the bisons. What I'm thinking of doing is warming up the bisons and then cooling the rest of the photo a bit. And that way the bisons will stand out a little bit more. So to warm up the bisons, I go to the temperature and I just dial the temperature up a bit. So let's look at the effect of this mask. Turn it off, turn it on again. It's already looking so much better, a lot more detail that I can see on the bisons. Next thing I'm going to do, I told you I want to cool down the rest of the image. So I need to select the snow and the trees. And to do that, I'm going to select the mask where I had the bisons, hit the 3 dots. I'm going to say duplicate and invert. Lightroom used to have a problem when you modified an initial mask and then inverted, it couldn't deal with the math. Well, with the June 2022 update, now that has been fixed. So I can duplicate and invert, and you can see it did a pretty good job. Now the area around the bisons is selected. I'm going to come now to the effects. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the temperature, I'm going to cool it a bit, not much. I'm going to reduce the shadow so that the trees are a little darker. And I think I'm going to soften it by reducing clarity a bit. So now there we have it. The last thing I want to do with a mask is I like the head of this bison right here is looking very good. I like the head of the bison to the left, but the bison in the center is a little bit too dark for me. So I'm going to create a new mask, and this time I'm going to use the radial gradient, and I'm going to put a radial gradient right on the head of that bison. And I'm going to bring the exposure up a bit, and I'm going to bring a little bit of the clarity, a little bit of the contrast, and just play until it looks good. Basically, I'm trying to even out the light so that I can see that head a little bit better. Now, I'm going to turn off all the masks. That's before the 3 masks that we just did. And this is with the 3 masks. So we're done with the local adjustments. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the detail section. And I'm going to zoom in on the eye of this bison. And I'm going to sharpen the image. I'm going to hold the Alt key, and I'm going to move the amount to the right. It turns it into a black and white image, and you can really see the effect. You may not be able to see it on your monitor, but until I start to see some halos, and in this image something like around 80-85%. I'm going to do the same thing with detail, and I bring the detail something to about 40%. And now the masking, the masking, if I hold the Alt key, everything turns white. If I move the mask, only the areas in white, as I'm moving the masking slider to the right, are being sharpened. And this is a good way to protect areas that may have noise from sharpening, so that when you go to the noise portion and just do a little bit of luminance, you don't have to do as much. We don't want to sharpen the noise. And this is already looking so much better. So let's review. This was the original image after the crop, and this is the image after the global edits, the mask, and the sharpening that we have to do up to this point. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a slight vignette, and you don't want to go very dark. I like to keep my vignettes between -10 or -12, nothing very heavy-handed. So this is without, and this is with, and just try to draw our eyes towards the center of the image where the bisons are. Finally, there are a few distractions. If we look at the head of this bison and we zoom in, there are a couple of pieces of grass that are just sticking out. They're too light compared to the rest of the background, which is the head of the other bison. I'm going to take the spot removal brush and just make it a little bigger and draw and replace that one. Did a very good job. I'm going to come do this other one. That one didn't do as good job. I'm going to move it. Something like that. These other ones here on the beard of this bison are no big deal. Maybe perhaps we can remove that one right there. And there are some blobs of snow that are a little too big, that I'm just going to take my time and remove a few of them, especially the ones that are more noticeable. This one right here on the nose. There's one here on top. And as you can see, there is actually some snow that was coming down that morning. And here's the image. So this is the before, after the crop, and this is the final image. Now let's review what we did. I'm going to go to the history. Here was the original image. After the crop, here's what it looked. Then we apply some global edits to give us a good baseline. Then we did 3 different masks, one on the bisons, one on the rest of the image, and then one to bring more attention to the center bison. Then we apply some sharpening, and that is better evaluated at 100%. Then we applied a slight vignette, and then we remove some distractions. And I'm going to go to full screen, and here is the final image. Well, amigos, I hope you like this quick edit of these beautiful 3 amigos of Yellowstone, these beautiful bisons. I leave you here with this video I did on a review of DxO Pure Raw 2, a great plugin for Lightroom to eliminate noise, especially if you work in RAW format. And as always, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, send me your comments, give me a thumbs up, tell your friends about the channel, help me grow it, and I'll see you next time.